All right, here we have a person who has Rahu in the 7th, all by itself. So a little bit of an easier Rahu to judge than if a Rahu had a bunch of planets conjunct it. So Rahu in the 7th is all about partnerships, working, trading, selling, buying, working with other people to create win-win situations. That's what the person's learning when Rahu's in the 7th. Let's just see how good Rahu is in this person's chart for learning that. Rahu is influenced by the moon and a different planet. Ruling the 12th house, he doesn't make Rahu more or less focused. Moon is in natural neutral sign and an enemy dignity, so not doing a whole lot. Mars is a favorable planet for the ascendant, aspects Rahu to just 9 points, but Mars is exalted, so that 9 points is going to help more than it looks. Best of all, Rahu is influenced by Jupiter, the 5th Lord, a great planet for Leo Lagna, boosting it to 49 points. So that makes it for, that really helps Rahu. Then Rahu is aspected by its Lord, who's in a natural neutral sign, to 53 points. So this Rahu is very, very open to, working with other people, learning how to be in relationships that are worth having. Okay, so it all looks really good. Rahu's going to give the results of Saturn as his Lord and as Saturn. How is Saturn doing? Well, Saturn is in a natural neutral sign, is aspected by enemy Sun and enemy Moon, getting hurt a little bit, but it's helped a little bit more by friend Mercury and friend Venus, both of which are in friendly dignity. Moon and Sun are in weaker dignity, so Mercury and Venus are actually going to help more. So Saturn is a little bit more mudita than it is hurt by these enemies Sun and Moon. So it's a pretty good Saturn, Lord of Rahu as well. So this is a nice Rahu in this person's chart. Okay, so we have a pretty decent Rahu dasha to look at. Now, obviously we need Rahu in the 7th house. We have to look at the Saptamsha and we have to look at the Navamsha, right? Children and marriage are going to obviously be a key factor and key thing in this person's life in Rahu period. In the Saptamsha, Rahu's in the sign of Cancer, going to give the results of the moon. The moon is in a natural neutral sign, but aspected by friendly Sun to 54 points. Neutral Mars, friendly Mercury to 50 points, but unfortunately Mercury's sleeping, so can't help. And then by Venus and Jupiter, both which are neutral. So not really helping it, but that aspect of the Sun is going to help, and so this makes it a mudita and delighted moon. So Rahu is going to act pretty well in general, given the results of his Lord Moon. He's also going to give the results of Saturn, who's in its own sign, in Mula Trikona actually, in the ascendant to boot. And Saturn is helped by his friend Venus to 28 points, who's really strong in the chart. He is hurt by the Sun and Moon, but not nearly as much as he's helped by being in Mula Trikona in Proud or Garvita Avashta, and helped by this nice Venus, who also is in Garvita Proud Avashta. So this is a pretty good Saturn. So the two planets that Rahu's going to act like in the Saptamsha are great planets. Okay, so we got a nice Rahu in the Saptamsha as well. Now Rahu is influenced by the moon, its Lord, which is helping Rahu be more open and more focused. By Mars, an unfavorable planet, but only to a few points. By Jupiter, another unfavorable planet, but then saved by Saturn, who's really strong as the ascendant Lord. So it's a pretty, relatively open, averagely open to going forward Rahu, but with really good lords. So that's a much better than average Rahu. It's a good Rahu. So we can expect good things to happen in respect to working relationships, relationships that have productivity, and relationships that have children. In the Navamsha chart, Rahu's doing great. He's joined the Karaka Venus, and Venus is in its own sign. Okay, can't complain about that. Remember, anytime Rahu's conjunct its Lord, it gets really strong and can do a lot. Otherwise, Rahu's influenced by the indifferent moon, by benefic Mars of 9 points, meaning benefic, it rules a good house lord, it makes Rahu more open, and by ascendant Lord Jupiter. It's hurt by Saturn, who's closing, the doors down a bit on Rahu. But all in all, this is a much better Rahu than it's not good, especially with it being conjunct its own Lord. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 planets helping it, and just 1 planet, Saturn, hurting it. I'm sorry, we've got Jupiter, what was it again? Where's Rahu? Okay. Mars and Jupiter helping, Venus helping, and then Saturn hurting. So it's a good Rahu. Okay, so this person's Rahu's looking like it could be pretty good in general. So let's look at periods. In Rahu, where was it again? Okay. In Rahu Saturn, the person meets his wife. Okay, in the Saptamsha, Rahu activates Saturn. In Rahu Saturn, the activation will be full. Saturn's in Mula Trikona as the Lagna Lord. So it makes total sense to meet his wife, because the Lord of the Lagna can always bring things together in that Varga. In the Saptamsha, the Lagna is the 7th from the 7th, and of course the 7th Bhava is the key Bhava in the Saptamsha. So the 7th from the 7th, the Lagna becomes important. So Rahu Saturn, he meets his wife. In the Navamsha, though, Saturn's not very good, though. He rules the 12th, 8th, and 11th bhavas. He's in an angle in a neutral sign, but he's not directly related to marriage. He's one of the planets that's closing Rahu down. So even though he meets his wife in Rahu Saturn, they have a good relationship because of this nice Saptamsha, he doesn't marry because Saturn's really not geared towards marriage. But then as soon as Rahu Mercury comes along, Rahu can always give marriage. It's activating Karaka Venus very nicely. Mercury comes along, who's the Lord of the 9th Bhava cusp, placed in the 9th Rashi from the ascendant, in a friend sign, aspected by enemy moon, but conjunct by Venus, and Venus is in its own sign really strong, which is more going to make up for the trouble of the moon. Aspected by neutral Mars, neutral Venus, and helped by friend Saturn. So this is a mudita, delighted Mercury for the most part, getting a little bit of hurt from the moon, but not much. And so marriage happens in Rahu Mercury period. Okay? And how's marriage going to be throughout Rahu Dasha? Because, Rahu Dasha can always be troublesome for marriage. Well, in this person's case, it's great. Venus is ruling Rahu and conjunct Rahu, and we've seen it's a great Rahu, and it's good in the Rashi chart too. So marriage is really successful for this person during this time. Okay? As it's pretty easy to see in this chart. Okay? Okay. The other important thing during this person's chart is Rahu's in the 7th. And the 7th house is the house of partnerships and working together. So anytime you're in Rahu period, that's going to become an important part of your life. The 7th house is also the 10th from the 10th. So one of the possibilities of working in partnership and working with other people is a lot of success, which is 10th bhava things. So anytime there's a Rahu's in the 7th, always pay attention to that Dasamsha chart too. Because the 7th house is the 10th from the 10th and can help you work with people, have partnerships that can really boost your career success. In the Dasamsha, Rahu's perfect for that. He's in the sign of Virgo with his Lord exalted. Okay? And other than that, he's influenced by the moon, who's the 3rd Lord from the ascendant, so closing him down a little bit, by Mars, who's indifferent, by Jupiter, who's a troublemaker, closing him down, ruling the 8th and 11th. But he's conjunct, he's got, not conjunct his Lord, but his Lord is in great dignity. So Rahu has some good potential here. Okay? But he'll close the doors to some opportunities because of Jupiter ruling the 8th and 11th. So he'll be focused on achieving some things that will reduce the partnership success that Rahu can give. Okay? But, it has an exalted Mercury with it. It's going to activate exalted Mercury, which is Garvita, proud. So there's going to be some good things to happen for this person, in respect to their career. Now, what are the other important periods going to be? Rahu Saturn's going to always possibly be important. In the Dasamsha chart, Saturn happens to rule the 9th and 10th Rashis from the ascendant, making Rahu very open. Saturn's in a neutral Rashi, aspected by enemy Sun, by enemy Moon, but helped by Mercury exalted, Venus in own sign. So it's a pretty decent Saturn, and it's the 9th and 10th Lord. So Rahu Saturn, this person has some good success with their career. It had been lagging for a little while, not going as good as they wanted to. But Rahu Saturn things really came together, and their career started jumping forward. Okay? Rahu Jupiter was not as good because of the fact that Jupiter we've seen is one of the planets that closing Rahu down. It rules the 8th and 11th from the ascendant in the Dasamsha. So Rahu Saturn was a good career period. After that came Rahu Mercury, the ruler of Rahu in the Dasamsha. Career kept going forward during that time. Okay? Then Rahu Ketu, there's a little bit of a letdown. Ketu is going to activate Jupiter. Not really a planet helping Rahu. But then Rahu Venus comes along. Remember what I say, Rahu Venus can make or break a person. Okay? And here Venus is an own sign, ruling the 1st and 10th Bhava cusp in the Dasamsha. And also a friend of Rahu's Lord Mercury. So it's a perfect Venus. So, Venus is influenced by its enemy's moon, but then it's conjunct its exalted friend Mercury, and it's an own sign. So it's a very mudita, happy, delighted Venus. And it rules that critical 10th Bhava cusp. And it's in the sign of Taurus. So in Rahu Venus, his career really starts taking off to where he's making $20-30 million a year. And you see that Venus in Taurus? Taurus is the money-making sign. He's the sign of counting your dollar bills. And having a great Taurus sign, especially connected to the 10th or 1st Bhava cusp in the Dasamsha, can mean the great things you do is one of the great things you could do is make a ton of money. And this person did. In Rahu Venus, their career just skyrocketed, and they were making tons of money during that time. So Rahu Venus can make or break a person, and this person, it very much made them. And we see Venus good everywhere. We see Venus good in the Navamsha. We see Venus good in the Saptamsha. We see Venus pretty good in the Rashi chart joined with friend Mercury. Okay? So really successful period. And those were the most important periods. Rahu Saturn, Rahu Mercury, because Mercury rules Rahu, Rahu Venus. Okay? Let's see. I think I talked about everything I wanted to talk about in this chart. Yep, I think that's it. So, pretty simple example. You see this chart, it's pretty obvious to see the good stuff. You have to look towards Saptamsha and Navamsha in the because Rahu's in the 7th. And you see Venus being good in the Navamsha, the Lagna Lord Saturn being activated by Rahu because it is Saturn being good. Venus being good in the Navamsha, the Saptamsha, and the Dasamsha. Plant all the Vargas, Rahu's activating strongly. And Venus is so important because Rahu Venus is a critical period that can make or break your life. All being good in those Vargas. So It's just a great Rahu in general. And so this person had a great Rahu Dasha. And it's easier to see when things just line up really nicely. Some of the other charts we've looked at, you see a lot of mixed influences, and it's a lot harder to make the predictions. You know, most astrologers could have easily predicted, yeah, Rahu Mercury and Rahu Venus will be fantastic periods. And they were. And so on. So a little more of an easy example, but showing the importance of Rahu Venus. Even if Rahu is not connected to Venus, like in the Dasamsha chart, Rahu is not directly connected to Venus. But Rahu Venus is always a critical period. So you want Rahu good and Venus good. And then in the Vargas that both those planets are in great shape, you'll have great success in. So Rahu's in great shape in the Dasamsha. Venus is in great shape in the Dasamsha. So in Rahu Venus, great things happen